Have you ever found yourself in a moment where you know, with absolute clarity, what you want, yet you feel an almost irresistible urge to act in a completely different way? Have you ever felt your decisions become clouded by an invisible, unspoken pressure, shaped by a single, nagging question? What will others think? Suddenly, you start to change how you move through the world. You choose your words with meticulous caution. You hold back your most authentic thoughts, not because they aren't true to who you are, but because you are terrified of being judged. If you allow yourself a moment of genuine honesty, you'll recognize that on some level, you crave approval. We all do, and right there in that simple human need, the trap is set. You see, society isn't designed to celebrate your raw, unfiltered authenticity. It's engineered to train you to fit in. From the earliest moments of your life, you were taught a powerful lesson. Being accepted is a currency of immense value. Pleasing others brings rewards, and following the established rules ensures that you will always belong. Without ever consciously realizing it, you learned to intertwine your self-worth with the perception of others. And just like that, the need for approval was planted, taking deep root within your mind. But this comes with a hidden, devastating cost. The more you contort yourself to be accepted, the more profoundly disconnected you become from your true self. Your choices cease to be reflections of your genuine desires, and instead become mirrors of your fear of rejection. Your actions start to feel less like life and more like a performance. Your freedom begins to feel like a carefully rehearsed act, staged for an invisible, ever-watchful audience. Deep down, without even admitting it to yourself, you become a prisoner to other people's opinions. And slowly, tragically, your life stops being your own. The brilliant psychoanalyst Carl Jung understood this painful truth better than almost anyone. He once famously said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you possibly live that truth if you are trapped inside a role you created merely to survive in the world? This is the real tragedy of a life spent seeking approval. It forces you to construct a persona, a mask, that eventually feels so familiar it can be mistaken for your real identity. And the more you invest in that mask, the further you drift from the shores of your authentic self. Even worse, the parts of you that don't fit that carefully curated image. Your anger, your unconventional desires, your deepest fears get violently pushed into the shadow. And as that shadow grows in the darkness, your connection to who you really are begins to fade away. Here we find a difficult, soul-crushing paradox. The more desperately you try to please others, the less you satisfy yourself. The more you chase acceptance from the outside world, the more you deny the truth that lives within you. In the exhausting effort to become what the world expects of you, you abandon your greatest gift, the courage to simply be yourself. In this video, you will discover how everything in your life can begin to shift the moment you stop chasing approval. We will delve into Jung's profound insights into psychological types and explore why some personalities are inherently more vulnerable to this trap. We will deconstruct the concept of the persona, uncover the life-changing power of the shadow, and learn about individuation, the sacred path to becoming whole. But I must offer you a warning. This path demands immense courage. It is far easier to keep playing the role that others expect of you. It feels immeasurably safer to continue pleasing everyone. But the real question you must ask yourself is brutally simple. Do you want to be accepted, or do you want to be free? Because the two rarely, if ever, go hand in hand. If you are ready to confront the invisible prison you've been living in, then this video could mark a major turning point in your life. The decision, as always, is yours. Are you ready to begin? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to constantly, desperately crave approval, while others manage to stay true to themselves, even when faced with harsh criticism or outright rejection. It isn't just a matter of willpower or personal history. According to Carl Jung's groundbreaking work, Psychological Types, the answer lies far deeper within our very nature. Jung believed that each of us possesses a dominant psychological orientation that fundamentally shapes how we perceive and interact with the world. This orientation can be directed either inward, which he termed introversion, or outward, which he called extroversion. But that is only the beginning. Jung also identified 4 key psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. And this is where things become truly fascinating. The unique way these functions manifest within you can dramatically influence how much you seek external approval. For instance, individuals whose dominant function is extroverted feeling are especially vulnerable to this trap. Why? Because their internal compass, their sense of direction and worth, depends heavily on the social environment. They evaluate their value, their decisions, and even their own ideas based on what is accepted, valued, or expected by others. The problem, of course, is that society is unstable, unpredictable, and often mercilessly harsh. Relying on it to define your identity is a fast track to profound inner suffering. Now, consider someone who is led by introverted thinking. They may also struggle, but for entirely different reasons. Their fear doesn't stem from a desire to please. It arises from a deep, seated fear of sharing their private, carefully constructed thoughts, only to have them misunderstood or rejected. The outcome, however, is hauntingly similar. They silence themselves, suppress their truth, and ultimately end up living a muted, dimmed version of their own lives, never daring to step into their full potential. Jung's deeper message is this: regardless of your psychological type, the insidious need for approval can quietly invade your mind, and the more unaware you are of its subtle influence, the more power it gains over you. Your psychological typology isn't a life sentence, it's a guide. Once you understand your fundamental wiring, you can begin to consciously resist the automatic, ingrained habits that push you toward chasing approval. But here is the real risk. Over time, this pattern can become a permanent fixture of your being. The more you act to please others, the more your brain becomes neurologically wired to rely on outside validation. Eventually, this doesn't just shape your behavior. It forges your identity. You begin to believe that you are only worthy if others accept you, that your intrinsic value is entirely dependent on external approval. This is how you become trapped. And here is the harsh, unavoidable truth: you can't please everyone. The harder you try, the more you lose touch with the very core of who you are. Every single time you say yes, out of a fear of rejection, a small part of your authenticity withers and dies. Over time, these seemingly small acts of self-betrayal accumulate, leaving you with a life that feels hollow and empty, completely disconnected from the person you were meant to be. That's why the first step toward freedom is recognizing how your unique psychological type feeds this destructive pattern. This isn't an exercise in self-shame, but in self-awareness. It's about learning to say no when your every reflex screams to agree. It's about finding the courage to stand firm in your convictions, even when you know criticism is unavoidable. And above all, it's about remembering this: your inner peace holds far greater value than the fleeting, fickle approval of others. But recognizing your personality type and its conditioning is only the first step. There is a deeper, more powerful force operating silently within your psyche. A force that turns the need for validation into a stage for an endless, exhausting performance. That's what we'll explore in the next part: the persona, the social mask you wear every single day, and the very mask you may have forgotten you're even wearing. Make sure you don't miss it. If this content is resonating with you, click the subscribe button and support the channel. Thank you. You are not who you believe yourself to be, and I am going to show you why. Every single one of us wears a mask. It's an unavoidable part of the human experience. From childhood, we are taught to behave in certain ways to be accepted, praised, and acknowledged. You learn to smile even when you're heartbroken. You say you're okay when you are anything but. You contort yourself to fit into environments that feel deeply uncomfortable, simply to avoid the sting of being different. Each one of these small, seemingly insignificant compromises helps to build and shape your persona. Carl Jung, in his essays on analytical psychology, explained the persona as a part of the psyche that forms to help you interact with the world. It is, in essence, a mask created for social survival. And here's the critical point that many people fail to see. The persona itself isn't the problem. In fact, it's essential. Without it, you wouldn't be able to function within society. We all need roles, professional, familial, social, to navigate the complexities of the external world. But herein lies the subtle and serious danger. When you become overly attached to your persona, you lose touch with who you really are. What was meant to be a temporary, functional role slowly becomes your entire identity. You forget your true self because you have become completely absorbed in the mask you built to gain acceptance. And this is precisely where the craving for approval becomes a suffocating psychological trap. The persona is shaped by what others expect from you. The more you strive to please, the stronger this idealized version of yourself becomes. And the more this false self is reinforced by praise and acceptance, the further you drift from your authentic core. You stop living for yourself and start performing for others. Take a moment to reflect with unflinching honesty on your own life. How many choices have you made simply to meet someone else's expectations? How many relationships have you clung to simply to avoid the guilt of letting someone down? How often have you suppressed your real thoughts and feelings just to maintain a certain image? Each of these moments adds another layer, another pound of weight to the persona, and pushes your real self deeper underground. Now, here is the uncomfortable truth. As long as you continue to invest your life's energy in maintaining this mask, you will never be truly free. True freedom demands honesty, and honesty demands the courage to disappoint not just others, but the carefully crafted image of yourself that you created to be accepted. Jung reminds us that the path to individuation, your full psychological development, requires that you break free from the persona's suffocating grip and reclaim your authentic self. The journey of discovering who you truly are begins only when you realize that the persona is not who you are. As long as you identify with this social mask, you will remain trapped in a relentless cycle of constant self-monitoring, paralyzing fear of rejection, and a deep-seated peace that never truly arrives. But breaking free is not an easy path. It demands a profound encounter with the unconscious forces that hold the persona in place. One of the most powerful of these forces is the fear of facing what you've hidden within yourself. The fear of your own shadow. This fear is the glue that sustains the persona, and it is exactly what must be confronted if we genuinely seek freedom from our need for external validation. In the next section, we'll explore this dark and compelling territory more deeply. You will see how integrating the shadow becomes the pivotal step in overcoming the fear of rejection and finally reclaiming your authentic self. Prepare yourself. This confrontation will be difficult, but without it, true freedom cannot exist. Now, ask yourself a simple but piercing question. Have you been living as your real self, or as the person you think you're supposed to be? If you've made it this far into the video, then you have already taken the first, most courageous step. Realizing that the face you show to the world may not be your true identity. But becoming aware of the mask is just the beginning. The real challenge lies in letting it go, and that requires a deep, intentional inner journey, what Carl Jung referred to as individuation. In works like Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious and Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung defines individuation as the sacred path to becoming who you truly are, not who society, your family, or your past has conditioned you to be. Make no mistake, this is one of the most demanding inner processes anyone can ever face, because it calls for a conscious and deliberate break from your false self. That false identity is the result of years, perhaps decades, of relentless conditioning. It was shaped by a symphony of spoken and unspoken rules. Boys shouldn't cry. Girls must be polite. Success equals status. Failure brings shame. You are only lovable if you're flawless. These beliefs rooted themselves deep within your psyche and built an artificial identity, one you eventually accepted as real. Why? Because it helped you survive in a world that consistently rewards conformity. It's so much easier to be accepted when you meticulously meet expectations. But each time you adapt, each time you conform, you stray a little further from your true essence. The price of fitting in is the slow, silent disconnection from your real self. Individuation is the process of courageously undoing this quiet agreement you made with a life of mediocrity. It is the path back to your authentic self, but let me be clear, it is not a path lined with comfort. Quite the opposite. It often passes through valleys of pain, dismantling, and profound solitude. Because when you finally break away from your false identity, disappointment is inevitable. You will disappoint your family, your friends, and the cultural norms you once adhered to. And, perhaps most painfully of all, you will disappoint the idealized version of yourself that you have carried for so many years. But here is a truth that is rarely spoken. This pain is essential. It is the sacred pain of transformation, like the pangs of birth. The old self must dissolve for the real self to emerge. Without this rupture, you remain confined, even if you choose to label that confinement as a fulfilling life. Jung reminds us that individuation is not a final destination. It's an ongoing journey, a continuous cycle of breakdown and renewal. It is a continual invitation to welcome all that has been rejected, hidden, or distorted in the desperate pursuit of acceptance. But how do you begin? How do you face the very parts of yourself you have spent your entire life denying? This is where one of the most profound and demanding concepts in Jungian psychology enters the picture. The integration of the shadow. The shadow is the container for everything you have pushed away out of fear, your primal instincts, your forbidden desires, your most uncomfortable emotions. And until you turn and confront it, you will remain under its unconscious control. At its very root, the constant nagging need for approval is the fear that your shadow might accidentally reveal itself. In the next segment, we will explore how the shadow is formed and why embracing it is the non-negotiable, key step in breaking free from the chains of external validation. If this message resonates with you, there is deeper guidance waiting in my books. Beyond the Shadow explains Jung's core principles in clear, accessible detail, while Dialogues with the Unconscious offers a 30-day practical path to apply them to your life. You'll find both linked in the pinned comment. Now, we arrive at the very heart of this entire exploration. All the elements we have discussed, social conditioning, psychological structure, the persona, lead us to one central and often hidden truth, the shadow. Carl Jung devoted much of his life's work to understanding this powerful concept. He shows us that the shadow is composed of everything we deny or disown within ourselves. But It's not just your flaws and weaknesses that constitute the shadow. It also includes your untapped potential, your suppressed anger, your unrecognized strength, and your deep longing for freedom. Everything you once deemed unacceptable, inappropriate, or simply too risky to show the world now lives in this hidden part of you. But what does this have to do with the fear of disapproval? The answer is everything. Our constant, gnawing need for approval often stems from the terror that others might catch a glimpse of the very parts of ourselves we have worked so hard to conceal, parts we have not yet even accepted in ourselves. As long as these aspects remain buried deep within the psyche, we are perpetually vulnerable to the opinions of others. Every critique stings like a personal assault. Every rejection feels like a catastrophic exposure. This state of fear keeps us locked in a vicious cycle of people pleasing, driven by the primal fear of being truly seen. Integrating the shadow is a bold and transformative act of inner courage. It begins by turning inward and speaking to those hidden parts with compassion, saying, "I see you, I acknowledge you, I accept you." This is not an easy process. Facing the shadow means consciously confronting the parts of yourself you would much rather avoid. The jealous part, the angry part, the insecure part, the needy part. But denying these traits doesn't erase them. In fact, the more you suppress them, the more they quietly steer your actions from behind the scenes, pulling the strings of your life like a hidden puppet master. True integration occurs when you bring these elements into your conscious awareness, gently and thoughtfully. It happens when you can finally admit, "Yes, I am capable of these darker emotions, but they do not define me." By embracing your full self, the grip of external judgment begins to weaken. Suddenly, there is nothing left to hide. You no longer feel the exhausting need to uphold a flawless, perfect image. But let's be crystal clear. Integrating the shadow does not mean giving in to every dark impulse. It means bringing those impulses under conscious, compassionate control, transforming them from hidden threats into potent sources of strength. A person who has integrated their shadow becomes whole, and wholeness brings an unshakable resilience, because when you have accepted every single part of yourself, the fear of rejection simply fades away. That is the real end of seeking approval. It's not about appearing tough or pretending to be unaffected. It's about developing a deep-rooted self-acceptance that completely eliminates the need for external validation. When you are no longer afraid of who you are, the judgment of others loses its power. Still, even the most insightful ideas become truly powerful only when they are lived. And no one demonstrated this path of shedding approval, seeking and embracing authentic wholeness better than Carl Jung himself. Jung's separation from Freud and the psychoanalytic establishment stands as a powerful, real-world example of the kind of courage it takes to follow your inner truth, even when it means facing total isolation and withering criticism. In the next section, we'll explore this compelling story, Jung's break from Freud, and see how he confronted his own shadow and emerged transformed, becoming the founder of analytical psychology. If you want to witness theory come alive in a real human life, do not miss this part. The rift between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud was far more than a mere intellectual disagreement. It was a true rite of passage, a bold and perilous step that placed Jung in direct conflict with everything he had meticulously built. Respect, status, professional security, and a leading role in the burgeoning psychoanalytic world. Walking away wasn't just an academic choice. It marked a profound personal transformation, a direct confrontation with his own shadow and one of the most universal fears we all carry: the fear of being rejected by those we most admire. In his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung shares this critical turning point with remarkable honesty. For many years, He was widely considered Freud's natural successor, the crown prince of the psychoanalytic movement. Freud was more than a mentor. He was almost a father figure, a towering presence in the intellectual world of the time. To stand beside Freud meant standing at the very heart of a revolution in human psychology. But slowly, Jung began to see that his own evolving understanding of the psyche no longer fit within the rigid confines of Freudian theory. Freud held firmly to the idea that human behavior was largely driven by repressed sexual impulses. For Jung, this was an overly narrow and limiting perspective. His own experiences through his dreams, visions, and deep exploration of archetypal symbols revealed a psyche that was far deeper, richer, and more spiritually complex than Freud's framework could ever explain. And then, the moment of truth arrived. Jung realized that in order to remain faithful to his own inner vision, he would have to walk away and face the devastating consequences of that choice, including the excruciating pain of professional and personal isolation. He knew he would be accused of intellectual betrayal. He knew the acceptance he once enjoyed within the psychoanalytic community would be replaced by harsh criticism, widespread disapproval, and perhaps most painfully, profound personal rejection from a man he deeply respected. And still, Jung chose to move forward not without fear or sorrow, but with unwavering integrity. During the period he later called his confrontation with the unconscious, Jung entered a deep psychological crisis. He became isolated, questioned, and disconnected from the scientific world that had once celebrated him. In that solitude, he turned inward and devoted himself entirely to the study of archetypes, mythology, and alchemy, the very work that would later become the foundation of analytical psychology. But none of this would have been possible had Jung not faced his own shadow. He had to confront his paralyzing fear of rejection, his wounded pride, and his deep-seated desire for approval from his father figure. In doing so, he emerged as a man no longer defined by external validation. He became free, both internally and intellectually. He no longer needed anyone's permission to follow his own vision.